This week we come to another narration of Mississippi. This Mississippi farther south, and also about 150 years at the end of after the Civil War, in Jesmond Ward's great novel "Salvage the Bones." And so this is kind of an introduction to the novel and some key points for reading as you go into it. What we have here is another coming of age tale. This is Esh Baptiste's story, kind of the story of her self-discovery as a young woman, emerging from adolescence and coming to know herself, and how she develops points of identification with other females in the story. One of those points of identification is with her brother's pit bull, China, who has just had a handful of puppies, and so Esh is kind of feeling her own sense of connection with China as she discovers that she too is pregnant. It's interesting within this novel how you develop a sense of Esh's awareness of the world, right? Her sense of connection to the past, her sense of memory, and how that works differently from Faulkner's narrator, Bayard in The Unvanquished. So do you see means in which Esh is more aware of her past, or more aware of a sense of connection with her past here? Also, you can kind of think about disillusion throughout the novel as kind of a main narrative impulse, that things are coming apart slowly. Esh is trying to come to terms with her pregnancy and loss, and the tension is whether she will ultimately do that. On page 36, she steals a pregnancy test and comes to the awareness that she is pregnant. This is on page 36. In the bathroom, the old pink tile that Mama helped Daddy lay feels wet, but I can't see any water on it. The tub is dry. I pull out the test, run the water while I tear the plastic. I've seen movies. You pee on the stick, which I do. I lay it on the edge of the bathtub and I climb in, careful not to kick it over on the floor. The tub is some kind of metal and it is warm. The plastic mat on the bottom of the tub is soft. I watch the stick like Big Henry watched the man. My feet are black against the white and they leave dirty streaks when I rub them against the tub. It's like I'm rubbing the color off. I sit on my hands. I avoid looking at my stomach. Flat in the tub, the way the man refused to look at the woman lying at his feet, sleeping in the long grass. Color washes across the stick like a curtain of rain. Seconds later, there are two lines, one in each box. They are skinny twins. I look at the stick, remember what it said on the package in the store. 2 lines means that you are pregnant. You are pregnant. I am pregnant. I sit up and curl over my knees, rub my eyes against my kneecaps. The terrible truth of what I am flares like a dry fall fire in my stomach, eating all the fallen pine needles. There is something there. And so from this, moment, Esh is trying to come to terms with, who she is now and what it means for her to be pregnant. And that awareness develops within the midst of other familial conflicts. She, it lives in the home with her father. Her mother is long dead, and her father wrestles with alcoholism. And also her brothers, her 3 brothers, are, in various points of contention as they are, also coming of age and growing and kind of finding their place in the world. Esh is a great storyteller here, and so you'll see some really great figurative language that's used by Ward as Esh kind of tries to build a sense of the world and her place within it. Of course, one of the really powerful points of this novel is that it is told in the historical context of Hurricane Katrina, which hit the Mississippi coast and Louisiana as well as Florida in August 2005. The storm itself meant over 1,800 deaths, and it left the region economically devastated for quite a period of time. Over 3/4 of the city of New Orleans was flooded for weeks following the storm. Levees were breached, and about 1/4 of New Orleans' population disappeared for a good decade while in the after effects of Katrina. So it's this kind of historic storm that is approaching as Esh is finding her way in the world. One of the other things that Ward does in terms of telling the story through Esh is that she finds points of connection with classical myths and sacred stories within the novel. It's interesting, you have a 12-day story series here. Kind of 12 is one of those magic numbers in the Hebrew Bible that's picked up in the Christian New Testament. So 12 is a kind of a whole number, a round number, and you have 12 days of stories in this novel. Esh herself in the novel is reading Edith Hamilton's book Mythology, and so she immediately kind of identifies with Medea of Greek mythology, who takes her revenge on her husband who has left her for another woman. And Esh kind of identifies with Medea's rage and anger. She also identifies with other female presences in this novel. She identifies with her mother's own story. Her mother dies in childbirth as her younger brother Junior is born. She identifies with China, who is Skeeter's pit bull, who's had the puppies. And she identifies with Katrina. The hurricane itself is given a female name, and so she kind of identifies perhaps with Katrina in her anger. We also have the place where the Batistes live, the pit, which is kind of an underworld as it's depicted. At one point, Esh narrates herself, "I am small, dark, and invisible. I'm Eurydice walking through the underworld." At another point, Skeeter walks into the shade under the trees on his way to the pit. And so the pit kind of figures itself as a space of great change and potential disillusion or devastation in the end, and it functions as kind of a mythic presence and place in the story. Esh's story, though, one central element of it is her crush on Manny, one of her brother's friends. Esh herself has her first sexual experience at age 12 with another boy, but she loves Manny, has a crush on Manny, and feels that Manny is the father of the child that she's carrying. She has, kind of a mythical view of all the boys around her, her brother's friends. She particularly the character Big Henry, because she kind of attaches herself to Big Henry's kind of large warrior-like kind of size and bulk. And on pages 26 and 27, you get a sense of that connection. At one point, Manny takes her aside, and has sex with her. And in that moment, she comes to realize, right, that Manny wanted the other me, my girl heart. She says she's always wanting Manny to notice her, wanting Manny to recognize her. And there's a moment where they are gathering bottles for the storm to start to gather water, and she cuts herself. This is on pages 11 and 12, near the bottom of 11. The crack of the bottle I was shaking sounded like change clattering in a loose fist. The bottle shattered and the glass fragmented, slid along my palms. I dropped what I held. "Move, Junior," I said. My hands, which moments before had been pink, were red, especially the left. "I'm bleeding," I said under my breath. I didn't yell. I wanted Manny to see me, but not as a weak, sorry girl, not something to be pitied because I couldn't take pain like a boy. Randall caught Manny's rebound and walked over to me as I kneeled, my left hand under the faucet, a ribbon of red making for the mud at my feet. He threw the ball backward. The cut was the size of a quarter, bleeding steadily. "Let me see." He pushed around the wound and it pulsed blood. I felt sick to my stomach. "You got to push on it until it stops bleeding." Randall put my thumb, which had been stopping the head of the bottle, over the cut. "You push," he said. "My hands are too dirty, until it stops hurting." It was always what Mama told us to do when we went running to her with a cut or a scrape. She would push and blow at the wound after putting alcohol on it, and then she'd stop blowing. It wouldn't hurt anymore. "There, see, like it never happened." Manny was throwing the ball back and forth with Marquise so quickly it sounded like the fast beat of a drum. He glanced over at Randall kneeling over me. His face was even redder than it usually is, but then he hissed like he always does when he's playing basketball, and I knew he was excited, not concerned. You got to push until it stops hurting. My stomach tilted. Randall squeezed once more and stood, and the glimpse I saw of Mama in his mouth when he told me to push was gone. Manny looked away. It's kind of the sense of that Esh is like discovering her own sense of isolation in the middle of this world, that she's facing this pregnancy alone. One character who does develop an awareness of her pregnancy early on in the novel is her brother Skeeta. As he takes care of China, he also begins to recognize that that Esh's body is changing, and you can find that story on page 47 as well. Esh identifies with Skeeta's dog China throughout this novel, and is always reading her to try to understand herself and the changes she's going through. When she sees China delivering the puppies in the first pages of the novel, she writes, what China's doing is fighting like she does as a pit. She wonders if China feels that her body feels like it's in the grip of one giant hand that wrings her empty as she delivers the puppies. This is told against kind of her brother's recognition of not a sense of identification with China, but a sense of what the puppies are worth. Like he will say at one point that puppies is real because he anticipates getting $200 per puppy, fighting dogs of the future. And when one of the puppies dies and China seems to push it aside, he'll say to her, "You bitch," on page 40. You can see that scene. So you have this kind of moment of Skeeta recognizing that his sister is pregnant, but also kind of wrestling with a sense of the other female he loves, his dog, his pet China, and how he deals with her. And finally, Esh, it's interesting here that Esh has a kind of growing sense of identification with Medea and Katrina as well as the novel goes along. It'll be interesting to see how you read that as the novel progresses. Thanks.